Okay, got a bit of an update on the Class 38, P8 also, as they were originally known. Now I've disassembled the chassis and found, before I took the wheels off, that it had about that much movement, and it would get stuck every time this white gear at the top went around once. So I've cleaned it. I don't see any actual wear on the gears, so they look pretty good condition, and they all mesh properly. But there was some sort of a burr or a grit in there somewhere that just stopped it turning, but I've cleaned it up and it's now running quite smoothly. So if I put that idler there, that runs quite nicely. Now the axles are very loose, so what I do is put a bit of fabric or some tape, cardboard or something around the axle, and you line it up exactly into the grooves of a pair of pliers, and then hang on, that's the one I've already glued. Not a good idea. Okay, take two. So that's spinning on the axle and comes off quite easily. And I use thread locker. This is the blue one that is removable. There's a red one that's permanent. Clean up the axle. Like this is used in automotive, and they don't degrease the parts before. They just put it on and it works. So and then I get a pipe cleaner, clean out the axle hole. Then put a drop of that into the axle hole. Make sure it goes all the way through. Now you want to support the wheel properly. Line that up so it's vertical. Doesn't want to go in there. Can't possibly have stuck already. Now we're cooking with gas. So I want that to be exactly flush with that wheel. And then, to be doubly sure, some more glue in the groove around there. So that it really flows into the joint. So it looks like that. And give that a bit of a wipe with a cotton bud. So this wheel has the bearing, the crank pin, sorry. That's the one that goes in the center. Then there's one with a smaller counterweight, and it has the grooves for the traction tire. That's the one that goes at the back. Now it's confusing with this one because the motor is actually at the front. Like that. So at the moment, the position of these crank pins doesn't really matter. But once you go to glue the other side on, so that's now pointing upwards. You want to put that at exactly 90 degrees. So pointing forwards or backwards. It's irrelevant which way, as long as that's offset 90 degrees to this one. Otherwise it won't work. And as you're putting the other wheels on, you also have to make sure then that these all line up. Give it a couple of spins to make sure. There's a certain amount of play in the gear train, but they should all line up in the same direction. So with this one, you can just start by putting the one closest to the motor in place, securing that, and you can put the second idler in and the center axle and fix that one, and then the front axle at the end, so you don't have to hold everything together as you're working on it. So also I've given the body a wash. It's turned out alright. The paint specs are pretty permanent. Some of them came off with a wooden stick, and as soon as you use a metal object it just takes the paint right off, so probably just touch them up with a bit of black paint perhaps. When I was taking it apart, so this is part of the motor and it sits at the front here. and then the armature lives in here. So even that turns all right. And then the motor shield, which goes on this way. It's very odd, this engine, normally the motor sits in the cab at the back for a steam engine, but this one they've turned it back to front and upside down, so the whole assembly is sort of quite unusual. So once that's back together, it spins quite nicely. Now the wire here with the insulating sleeve joins to there. That has to be unsoldered before you can take any of this apart, and it's quite delicate. So if that breaks, then you end up unwinding the coil to find the middle and reconnect it. So best to make sure that that doesn't break. And the wire that comes up from the pickup plate down there, which now doesn't want to, anyway, so that connects to this solder point here. And also the reversing relay that sits in here. Also, that's the main solder point there. I've taken the spring off this and put it in a bag because they tend to disappear. And then there's also a wire for the headlight, which is on its own plate, like that. And that sits in there and is secured with a screw. So next task is to obviously put the wheels back on. The chassis has cleaned up quite nicely. And then I can put the electrical system back together after a bit of cleaning. But this is looking promising.